Hi, welcome to Level with Emily Reese. This is music by Sergio Ronchetti for Eldest Souls. It's a boss rush, Souls-like game. It has beautiful pixel art and a really fun battle style. But yeah, it's difficult to play. It's Souls-like, right? You're going to die a lot. But the music is a great incentive to keep slashing away at these oversized, overpowered bosses. Sergio talks about how he became the composer for Eldest Souls.
This game has been in development just over 3 years. I met John and Francesco, the developers at Fallen Flag, about 3 years ago. Well, when we were all three of us at uni, and I met them in London as they were taking a year out from their course, and they were already starting work on Eldest Souls as a sort of student project, nothing too serious. And they're quite savvy for two Italians studying in England, so they managed to pick up interest from a few publishers and some funding, and the rest is history. Basically, we've been working on it ever since. The game itself is in this beautiful pixel art style, in the vein of a Souls-like game like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, games that the two of them were massive fans of, like very difficult, very unforgiving, challenging sort of combat. And it's specifically revolved around a boss rush game. So there's some exploration in between, but really it's all about the fights.
Yeah, and I've played it, and I've definitely made it past the first boss. I think I died 6 times for the first boss, so that wasn't too bad at all.
And 6 times is pretty good.
I know, but the second boss, I'm just like, listen. The second one has been really difficult, and I love the music for the second boss too, so I look forward to asking you about that. But was this the first time, Sergio, that you worked on a game?
This was the first project that I started working on. Like, since then, obviously, it's been quite a few years. I've managed to pick up a bunch of other indie game projects and work with loads more clients. But
nice.
Really, yes, this is the first finished, released game that I've kind of put my name to. So I'm very, very excited.
Yeah, and you did the sound design too, right?
Absolutely. Everything you hear is all me.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, what did you think about doing that aspect of it? Because I know you've been involved in music for basically your whole life, and we'll talk about that too. But what was it like to then also assume the sound design work?
So it was a pretty casual kind of like arrangement. Like my work started just like on a trailer that they needed out. And then from then they were like, great, we love your music. Like, we'd love for you to work on the game. Would you like to do the sound design as well? And at that point, I literally had no experience, almost no knowledge of what sound design was and what it entailed. And I was like, yeah, sure, fine. Why not? Like, I've seen a few Facebook Foley videos, like, how did they make that sound behind the movie sort of thing? And like, I was like, I could do this. This sounds great. I can step on leaves and scrunch stuff up with my hands and record it. And wow, I'm so glad I said yes, because it's turned out to be another passion of mine. I seem to have some sort of natural interest and knack for it as well. So yeah, it's been a blast.
Nice. And you're a gamer too, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, I think that's an important part, but easily taken for granted, yeah.
Yeah, because I noticed, I think it was on Twitter, it says you want to score a God of War game. Is that right?
Hell yes.
Yeah.
Hell yes.
That'd be amazing. That's
just kind of like I don't know, I thought it'd be interesting to give somebody an insight of what I kind of still aspire to do. And I think if I had to dream big, like, that would be it. Like, that would be the pinnacle for me. Like, yeah, because I love those games. I love the music. Ever since, Winifred Phillips did the first one, right up until like Bear McCreary's new work on the latest edition. It's been amazing. I love that franchise. So yeah, I mean, yeah.
talk a little bit about the music in this game. You know, you mentioned this boss rush, so, this game is focused on these big, huge, really quite long boss fights, and so your tracks are long and they really get to dig into these themes and stuff. So talk to me about, constructing the music for these big boss fights.
I kind of describe it as having to convey two different messages for this whole game. One of them is this challenging boss encounters that you find, like super unforgiving, very difficult, very intense. And that really is pretty straightforward. I come from a background of playing and writing in heavy metal bands and as a bassist. So all my writing experience and sort of inspiration still comes from that kind of heritage, I guess, that you could say that I built up when I was younger. So really, I still listen to heavy metal songs, and to make aggressive music is kind of, you could say now it's in my blood to do so. So I absolutely loved every second of that. It kind of just came to me quite easily, aside from learning, orchestral conventions to make it fit within the instrumental palette that I was using. Mm-hmm. The other message is kind of that idea of loneliness and really up against insurmountable odds, which is what the Crusader, the protagonist that you play as, is facing. Kind of like a lone warrior really up against these deities, these incredible powers, and being sort of that glimmer of hope that's left. And for that reason, I kind of drew on my post-minimalist inspirations, people like Max Richter, people like Ryuichi Sakamoto, who scored The Revenant, like that sort of repeating, very kind of almost hypnotic sort of ideas in music, where you have that same kind of haunting melody that's reinforcing itself every time it plays. Very simplistic but very powerful kind of music, and for that reason the main theme sounds very different to the other tracks.
Yeah, the main theme is very kind of you mentioned, I think, lonely and kind of ethereal and much more I guess pensive in quality, melodic in quality, and
that's good.
Yeah. Than the big boss tracks, for sure. And I wanted to ask you too about just being a bass player. I was a trumpet player my whole life, and so I became accustomed to hearing from the top down. And so the older I got, the I had to train myself to listen to the bass. You know what I mean? Like I had to really focus on that, so that, just to become a better musician, better listener, all of those things. So I'm always fascinated with, bass players, tuba players, all the low-end players who learn that right off the bat. You learn to listen from the bottom up, to really oversimplify it, I think. So talk to me about how you feel like, being a bass player kind of affects your composition.
Emily, I'm going to give it just 30 seconds because my dishwasher is about to make a beep and I can't stop it.
Okay, no worries.
It's a fantastic question, but I don't want this to ruin it. I'm so sorry.
No,
this is
not
what you
at
get
all.
for living in an open floor apartment.
I know, I do
London.
too.
Here he goes.
Yeah, no worries. I just moved to an apartment. I lived in a house for 10 years, and I just moved to an apartment about 3 months ago. It's been quite an adjustment, but yeah,
right,
I can relate to like having sounds afar.
Yeah. Lived in a house my whole life, and now living in this open plan, I think, oh, it's so cool. I'm modern and everything. And then you're like trying to watch a movie and trying to do the washing at the same time, and it's just like, no, I changed my mind. Anyway, right, okay. Right, to answer your fantastic question, which is so interesting as well, like to hear the way that you think musically as well, based on your background and what you play. And yes, it's very true. I think in terms of a bassist still, and like in my band, it was all about, being the guy in the background, the kind of silent hero. That's the way I like to say it. I like to glorify it. Yeah. I was the silent hero, the thing that nobody wanted to notice, but I was essential. As essential as any other piece in the band. So I also liken game composing and film composing to being a good bassist, right? Because my favorite compliment at the end of a night playing a live show was not somebody coming up to me and going, oh man, your bass, it sounded so amazing, like your playing was incredible. I preferred it when people came up and said, your band sounded incredible, right? Like the whole thing was, because I'm like, great, excellent, thumbs up, I did my job. Nobody noticed me. They just realized what I was doing to the rest of the band, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's the same with scoring media. Like, you don't want to stick out, because if you do, you ruin that immersive experience, that focus that a player should have, you know?
Yeah.
The music should enhance everything, support it, not get in the way or take up too much of the light. And I guess you could say, yeah, when I start scoring any sort of music, I think of the drums, I think of the low end, like the double bass lines, the staccatos and stuff like that, and build from there.
Comes through in the tracks, these just really driving bass lines that kind of just keep you going through these fights. And the track for the second boss is called Hunk of Steel and Flesh, and I just love it. It gives that boss in particular, and having not beat that boss, I don't know who comes next, but I can say that boss is just like this big giant knight in armor with this huge shield, and just it gives him so much presence to have that driving bass. Can you talk to me about that track, Hunk of Steel and Flesh?
Yeah, sure. I think at the time I was listening to a lot of Ramin Djawadi, who scored Pacific Rim, the first one. He also did Game of Thrones and a bunch of other stuff, Westworld, like amazing composer in his own right. But obviously Pacific Rim was like a big monster movie. And one of his cues, I think it was something like 10,000 tons of awesome or whatever, describing one of the kaiju. And it was just so fitting. You know, it was just big brass. It sounded like a big monster. So I guess I drew from that as sort of inspiration, even though they sound nothing alike.
Yeah.
To the idea of enhancing this boss's characteristics and personality. Like, it really is this, like you described perfectly, this big lumbering kind of beast that's got no real life to it. It's just on one mission, which is to stop you and anybody else entering this ancient citadel that you're trying to break into, where all the gods are being kept. Also, without knowing, again, I try not to think too hard about this. I try to just write from what I enjoy hearing as I'm doing it. So, and without knowing, it sounds very much like a kind of doom metal or what have you sort of rock song, where it's just a simple driving riff, something, I don't know, maybe that Cannibal Corpse might write if they were writing anything under like 300 BPM, yeah, something like that.
And, you know, you mentioned in the beginning and that you were in school when you met the game makers, and you had toured and done a lot of playing in bands and then decided to go back to school. Will you talk to me about that transition?
Sure. I'll talk to you about anything, Emily. Whatever you want to ask me. Let's go.
All right.
That specifically, yeah. It's at the end of the 4 years, I had enough. I was burnt out mentally and physically. I describe those years as the highs being like the best moments of my life, and the lows being quite literally rock bottom for me. Like, didn't get any worse than that so far. You know, there's still time, but so I kind of had enough of it. Towards the end, I realized that sort of traveling and that touring lifestyle as well just really didn't suit me. And obviously there was no money involved, and whenever there was, it went straight back into whatever we needed to spend it on. So had enough of that. Also had enough of being in a room full of egos, trying to write a song, myself included, kind of fed up of waiting for the lead singer to get hit with this moment of inspiration. Otherwise, the song wouldn't be finished. And so I had to do a lot of kind of unpacking and like unraveling in terms of how I write and how I think about when I write music. And going to uni was a massive eye-opener. I really just re-educated myself in the process of how to sit down and how to do something from start to finish. And it was great. It really, at the end of it, I think about 10% of my higher education actually directly is applicable to what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So I had to go around my course. I had to do short courses for DAW production, mixing and mastering, the game audio stuff like implementation, FMod, and all that good stuff. But really what uni did was open my eyes, surround me with like-minded, motivated individuals, and the professors who are awesome. Like I still talk to many of them today. They're the reason I go back to unis and give lectures myself now, which is also another very exciting thing, because I'm very passionate about teaching people who need a little help, just like I did. I don't like to believe in luck. I prefer to believe in coincidence, because luck kind of, encourages people to not be proactive about things. But really, it was super serendipitous. Let's go with that word instead of luck.
Yeah.
Like to have met John and Francesca, and more the fact that I met people who were in exactly the same position as me, just in a different field. So it married up so perfectly that we worked together on our first game together, because we had the space and the patience to give each other time to learn what was expected of us in each of our roles. You know, I didn't know what everything that I could be asking for as a sound designer, or what the depths that I could go to make my work the best it could be. And so it was great being in that process with them. Similarly with them, you know, with their game design and organizing the whole project. They have to be producers and game designers in such a small indie environment.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of these later tracks. Of course, you can hear the soundtrack. It's on Spotify. It's out there. So even though I can't quite beat the second boss yet, I was able to spend a lot of time with the soundtrack, which was nice. And a couple other tracks that I really liked a lot. Beast of the Everforest. There's this really fun kind of duple, triple feel that you do there. Can you talk to me about that track?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I'm surprised, like, even on the streams that we've been watching, like people have been commenting a lot on that track, and I'm actually surprised, because it's not the track I would have picked, but whatever, that's fine. Like,
yeah, I think it might have to do with that rhythm. That rhythm just feels really good. The hemiola you've got going on there is really nice. Yeah.
It's, I guess.
Maybe.
yeah, sure. I mean, you're not wrong. It's I guess that track was all about sounding a little bit more tribal. You know, sounding a little bit more. Like, is this, not to spoil it for anybody, but this deer god that you're fighting up against is situated in the forest, in the wild. So I guess you needed something a little less. If we compared it to the Guardian, for example, with the boss that you're stuck on. Don't worry, I'll give you tips after this. There's plenty good. You can try. That I guess was more straightforward, less more on the grid than, say, maybe the Deer God, which had to sound a little bit more wild. I guess that was the personality I was going for. But I think on all of the cases, I try to focus on the emotion more so than the technicalities of what I'm trying to do with the music, etc., etc. Like, I always ask John and Francesco, just give me 3 words to describe the setting or what you want me to write music for. That's it. Like, the emotion, the pace, whatever. Just give me 3 words, and we'll start there. I'll write a piece of music, and if you like it, great. If you don't, then we'll go from there. And it seemed to work, you know.
Yeah, I loved that track. I also loved Fragments of an Eternal Nightmare.
That one actually was based on a reference. I think the only time that they actually gave me a reference. And John, I think, came to me and was like, oh, dude, it would be so cool to have music like this in the game. And for the life of me now, I cannot remember where it was from. I'm sure I can fish it out eventually. It was from one of these MMOs, I think. And I was like, yeah, sure, we can do that. Like, I mean, if that's what you want, let's go for it. I really enjoy the challenge of just answering a brief. I think that's the most exciting thing for me, as opposed to having it have my stamp in inverted commas, you know, whatever that means. Because I don't know about you, but I think there's a lot of pressure on, especially young composers, to try to write something original and nail that like super unique sound like straight away. Like, yeah. And we're listening to our idols who have been training and leading up to that moment, that uniqueness that they have for like decades, and we're trying to replicate it straight away. So I try not to get bogged down in it. I try to just focus on the job at hand, knowing full well that the small nuanced decisions that I make along the way will make it sound like me. Mm-hmm. You know, it's that can't be helped. It will always sound like you, because you make decisions different to anyone else. You have different equipment, different environment, etc., etc. So yeah, that track was fun. That was following the reference he gave me, and it was, yeah, just another unique challenge.
I think, too, you know, a lot of times in games, certainly not all the time, there's plenty of exceptions, but often music can be kind of short. You're asked to write a little bit shorter tracks that loop, and obviously your tracks loop in the game, but they're much longer because of these boss fights. So talk to me about that length, you know?
I mean, it all started with me trying to decipher and analyze the tracks that are used in like Bloodborne and Dark Souls and that. And I guess I wasn't able to delve deep enough, but to me it sounds like those games just have these fantastically epic tracks that just play out. And I'm sure there's a loop point at some point, but you really can't hear it. They just sound like these big, long, epic pieces, which is great. So I kind of went with that to begin with, just thinking like, I'm just going to write a big track and then put it in the context and then see if it needs these kind of adaptive loops, these moments where the music should really reinforce specific changes in the fight. So like some tracks, like for example, God, it's so hard remembering the names of the tracks because I still have the working titles in my head, which are sound nothing like the new. Obviously, you know, I had to make them cool for the soundtrack, so they all changed. And oh God, it's for Hyam. It's for the ice one. Is there an ice name on my soundtrack?
Frigid Resilience.
Thank you. Yes, that one, the cold one, the cold track.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. Right, yeah, Frigid Resilience. That one was, again, in the same style. I just wrote a big track, and then through the process, I realized that it needed its own loops and little sections to kind of adhere to the progression of the fight. So I had to go back into my DAW and really chop it up and add these little variations, because there are specific moves that it jumps to this little motif and then jumps straight back into the main piece of music. So, and really, I attribute the knowledge to do that all to using Fmod, all to understanding how implementation works. And though I'm not a really keen, I'm not the best implementer out there. I mean, it's not really something that I focus on. I do it because it's a skill that I have, because it's something that I have to rely on and do when I'm working in, you know, indie projects require you to do all of the roles in one. I know some people who just focus on writing music, which is great, but I always tell them to at least just open Fmod and just have a quick insight into how it works, because I've realized that I can go into Fmod, realize how a loop would be made, and then I jump back into my DAW and I compose slightly differently, because I know what I can get away with or what I can achieve after I've finished writing the track. So so some tracks were super long and I kind of shortened them myself. For example, the Scavenger Hound is quite a short track. I think that's probably the shortest one in the whole game, and that's just because the fight was very straightforward. It didn't need anything more. Sometimes you don't have to put more in. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be so flash. It just can be straightforward.
Yeah, that first boss is just like a little tease. Like, this kind of lets you know, oh, okay, this is going to be really hard, but I can beat this guy. That's what I thought about that first track.
That's it. It draws you in.
So have you beat the game? I mean, you've played it all, yeah?
I am actually planning to do a little silly YouTube series. I've had this idea, Emily, for a while, to do this kind of series which is called Composers Who Are Bad at Playing Their Own Games. Something like that.
Yes.
Right? And just getting a bunch of composers and being like, what, oh, you just released the game? Cool. Let's play it. Let's see how terrible you are at them.
Yeah.
You know, and then like talking over it. Like, maybe we could talk about, we'll organize this maybe later. Maybe you can help me put this together. But
I can help you with that, yes.
Right, great. So I haven't played through the game as a gamer. I've played through it as a developer. So it's going to be very interesting to sit down and go through it and see if I can actually do it on merit, you know, because up until now I just used all the cheats and all the dev functions that allow me not to die and stuff like that.
Yeah, just so you can hear how the music plays out through a battle, right?
Exactly. It wasn't, that was the focus at the time, just to get through the battle and actually, you know, get to the end of the track or end of the fight without dying, so I could hear my music.
So, what other games are you playing right now? Do you have time to game these days?
I make time. Time.
Nice. Yes.
I hate it when people. I get it. As we get older, it's you know, we have less and less time, more commitments. But you know, if you want to do something, you got to make time. So yeah, at the moment, I'm going through the Doom DLC.
Oh, nice.
Because I love Doom. Doom is my jam. That is, just give me a big gun and a big monster to shoot at, and I am happy as hell for hours on end. And obviously the music of that, like it's Mick Gordon, that heavy metal, like, oh, beautiful. Yep. So that I'm in heaven with that. Yeah. So playing that, I'm slowly but surely making my way through Little Nightmares 2, which has been fantastic as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I managed to get my hands on a PS5, so I've been going through like Astro's Playground and
nice
Playroom and Ratchet and Clank, which is just ridiculously good. Like I've never played a Ratchet and Clank before, and this game is unbelievable. Yeah, I guess I just missed it as I was growing up, right?
Yeah.
And also reading like how the sound designers are getting a hand on the designing of the haptic feedback function on the new controllers. And at first I was like, why are the sound engineers doing it? Surely this is more of a developer thing. But then I guess it makes perfect sense. I was reading how they were doing the sound for Returnal, and it sounds amazing. I've been listening to the soundtrack by Bobby Krilich like nonstop. I haven't played the game yet, but I am dying to, because everything sounds great. And the way they were describing how they married the haptic feedback stuff with the audio to make this incredible experience just sounds so exciting. So.
I'm curious, what kind of music you listen to. Do you have much leisure listening, or are you mostly listening for learning, like listening to a lot of soundtracks to absorb things like that? Or, how does that work for you?
It's really difficult, and maybe you have this as well, but if you're in front of speakers or having headphones on all day working, the last thing you want to do when you finish is listen to something.
Yes.
Especially listen to it loud. Do you know?
Yes.
So if I'm really busy with work, I tend not to listen to anything afterwards. I tend to really rest my ears because they need it. They really do need it. There is such a thing as tired ears, and either you hurt yourself or they become kind of useless, right?
Yeah,
you stop.
yeah.
But when I do, it's still falling back on the bands that I love who are still releasing music. People like Bring Me the Horizon and Gojira, the French prog band, Machine Head, Trivium, and the classics like Metallica. I still think it's cool to be a Metallica fan, so I'm still there with them. And
Nice.
when it comes to like soundtracks, I like listening to soundtracks in context with what they were made for,
Yeah.
So the film soundtracks and the games, like I love listening to them while I'm playing. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll stop and like just listen to, see if I can hear the loop for the ambience, or really take in the cue, like pause playing for a second and just appreciate the audio. But outside of that, I tend to take a break from music in general. And I don't do it on purpose. I don't do it to be like arrogant or like some
Right.
sort of tactic to write better music. Like I'm not going to listen to music. That's why I'm better.
Yeah.
No, it's literally just because I don't know. I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by music, and as much as I love it, it's nice to get a break sometimes. So, but yeah, every now and then, like I said, that a soundtrack will grab me, and I'll just listen to it like on repeat. And at the moment, that's the Returnal stuff.
You mentioned that you have other things you're working on now. Can you talk about any of those projects?
Yeah, sure. I mean, none of them are announced, or they've been smaller things that I've been doing more so for work as opposed to, I guess, putting my name to it. I guess I'm being more thoughtful now of what I want people to hear when they read my name, sort of thing. And I think I'm at that stage, which is an advantage. I'm lucky to have been at that stage now where I've worked on a project which I genuinely want to be known for, and want to write more music like it. So but yeah, in between, I've worked on many different clients, kind of grabbing hold of that freelance lifestyle and maximizing it as much as possible. It's also something that I now find myself in a position able to teach other people about it and coach younger sound designers or composers who are like 3 or 4 years behind me, like just starting out like I was. And it's nice to be able to pass on what I know to them. So, and some of the other stuff is super different. Like I've just finished work on a rhythm game, which every track was a totally different genre.
Oh,
and
wow.
like genres that I've never written before. And I told the developer, I was like, I've never written a song like this. He's like, yeah, that's fine. You seem like a nice guy. I've been recommended by so-and-so, and you seem like a great guy to work with. So which is great. I take the compliment. Thank you. Like,
Yes.
and then let's try and write this German minimalist techno song that I've, never listened to. And it worked. It was fine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. I do want to mention, because you've said it a couple of times now about how you do coaching, and your website talks about, if people want your help, they can just reach out to you and get some coaching, right?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. It's, again, I've been teaching on the side, like still now, like my whole life. My first job was teaching at one of those Kumon math centers, and then teaching one-to-one, like people like trying to get into secondary schools, high schools and stuff like that. So I've always loved teaching, no matter what it was, guitar, academics. And now I get to do it alongside the thing that I love to do. So it's kind of, I'm living the high life. Like I love it. Like everything's great in my life at the moment. So yeah, but even if you don't want coaching, I'm always open for anybody just DMing me and asking a question. Like I'm an open book. So.
And where can we find you?
I'm most active on Instagram, which is just my name, Sergio Ronchetti. My website is sergioronchetti.com. But yeah, if you want to just have a casual chat, Instagram, Twitter, yeah, that's where you can find me.
Well, what more would you like to say? Again, I just really enjoyed listening to the soundtrack. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you. But if you've got things you want to add, now's the time.
Well, likewise, it's been awesome. What are you working on, Emily?
Oh my! Right now, I'm actually working on a project with Valve, doing a behind the scenes on the Half-Life VR game that came out last year. So I'm slow getting it out, but I'm getting real close to finishing that. So I talked to three sound designers, the composer, Mike Morasky, and then the man who co-invented Steam Audio, which is a sound simulation tool for developers to use in games. And so, the Half-Life, the new Half-Life game that came out last year, that's the first Valve product they used it on. So
Right.
we talked about that.
Amazing.
And yeah, it was really amazing. But I've never done a project that big before, so it's been pretty chaotic. And like doing that, I mean, we've been working on it for a few years now, but then like COVID hit and that got all messed up, and then
it's been a challenge.
It's been a challenge, but I'm getting so close, and so that's what I've been spending most of my time on. And then I do this podcast, and then I do another podcast with a friend of mine who's a sommelier. So she's like beer, wine, cocktails. She knows everything about alcohol and anything fermented. And so she talks about that. And I talk about either jazz or classical, because that's my first training is in jazz and classical. Yeah. So we talk about those two things in some way, shape, or form. We try and find some kind of common theme that's not.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So that one's called Scores and Pours.
Scores and Pours. That's
yeah. And that one's great fun, but also a lot of work. We try and do a lot of interviews with that lately, and we try and do a lot of like on-site visits. So there's a lot of editing involved in that too, but it's really, really amazing fun. So that's
how exciting. How exciting. And also you touched, I'm actually interested now in interviewing you, Emily, if you have a second.
Sure, go ahead.
You touched on how you think in terms of like top down.
Yeah.
I guess in terms of, you're talking about like frequency, kind of like instrumentation.
Yep.
Like how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's complicated. Because my mom is a singer and she was always an alto. And so I always heard the harmony really well too, but I would, primarily listen to melody. And, even now, this friend of mine that I do this other podcast with, she knows so much more about like pop music or anything that you would hear on the radio in the last 40 years. Like she's on it, whether it's Al Green or Madonna or whatever. She knows it all. She knows all the drum parts. She knows the bass parts. It's incredible to me. And she'll play me a song that I've heard thousands of times in my life, and she'll like point out this bass part that I'll have never heard before, And it's so strange to me, because I'm like, wow, I know that song really well, but I've never heard that bass line because I don't listen down like that. I have to think about it, Yeah. So it's strange. And I kind of think it's a product of being a trumpet player and always having the melody, I mean, that's kind of what I always thought it was, why it was like that,
Sure. And I guess that serves as an advantage in some ways, because you are focusing on like your niche, like your part.
Yep.
And because of that focus, you can do it so well.
Yeah.
I also remember the first time like your ears start becoming more analytical as you're listening to something, and all of a sudden you can dissect the song into layers that nobody knows. And I remember talking to like one of the drummers I was playing with, telling him like, oh yeah, this is what the bass line does in this song. And he was like, oh, really? I've never heard that before. I've never even noticed that.
Yeah.
And it's true, unless you point it out. And I guess it's the same with the sound design that I'm listening. I know that my ears are getting better at picking things up. The same with the music. Like, the more I do it, it's.
Yeah, you, like, learn to listen in a different way.
Yeah. It's a massive skill in itself. Yeah.
And that's why score study is so valuable. For me, to visually see the music is really helpful, and that helps to draw my attention to different things too. But I mean, I was a piano player first, but never very good at it, and I always struggled with the left hand. And I can read treble clef way faster than I can read bass clef. So,
So I was the other way around. Exactly the same experience. I did piano for a little bit, and left hand was fine.
Yeah,
it's the right one.
Well, we'd be good on a duet then.
Right? Yeah, sure. Just very excited to be working with John and Francesco on the follow-up project, which is already sounding really exciting. It's way too early to say anything else, but it's very exciting now to be. I guess as well, another advantage of working in indie games is that you have more influence or more say in the stuff around your job, which makes you feel more part of the team. It really feels way more rewarding, way more satisfying. You're not just doing your job and then clocking out at the end of the day. So it's been great, and I'm fortunate enough to find myself like really good friends with the guys that I work with. So we're kind of pushing that relationship to the next level, and it's exciting. It's very exciting.
Well, I cannot wait to hear what comes next and play it as well.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for listening to this episode of Level with Emily Reese. You can learn more about Sergio Ronchetti at patreon.com/level. I'm Emily Reese. Sam Keenan is our producer. Say hi, Sam.
Hi.
You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Level with Emily and learn more about us at levelwithemily.com. That's made possible by Adam Selvage at Tiki Web Services, and our YouTube channel is managed by composer Brad Gentle. Level with Emily Reese is a production of June Media, Inc.